Part 23. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Sheng. Chapter 221. Chapter 221 Gods and Buddhas welcome her. Mrs. Shen left 5 slap marks on her daughter-in-law with 1 slap. What an injustice, what an injustice, it's my Shen family that is unlucky. After the old lady slapped her, she fainted in the snow. Old madam, the maid's expression changed drastically. Fortunately, the dean took her pulse and said, I feel so angry that I'm so angry. Just go home and rest. But, there can't be a next time. The next time I will have a stroke. The old lady has worked hard to raise her child, and now all destroyed. Mr. Shen deeply thanked the old dean before asking someone to send the old lady back to the mansion. Mrs. Shen was shaky, and she knelt on the ground and kowtowed in the direction of Mrs. Shen. Mother, husband, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. The woman cried silently. Perhaps, the two of them had a bad relationship from that time they fell into the water. Master Shen took a deep breath. Whose child is it? The woman was silent. Master Shen gave a wry smile. I never thought that we would reach this point. Are you still protecting him today? That's it, let's make peace tomorrow. Shen Tang will not have any objection if she makes a serious mistake. If she does not, a letter of divorce is indispensable. I have made mistakes over the years. I walked too fast and tried to change the future of the Shen family. It was also my fault that I didn't pay attention to your steps. Peace and divorce are already the best arrangement. Mr. Shen turned around. The body staggered. Mr. Sir. The woman shouted sadly. The voice was full of regret and guilt. The root cause of his illness is due to saving himself. Ever since she had a different heart 3 years ago, she has enjoyed the joy and the meticulous care, but she has also been oppressed by guilt in her heart. Whenever my husband came back from the court, he would even go around half the city to buy her favorite snacks. There was a thin layer of cold sweat on his forehead, and his official uniform was soaked through. He had never slacked off for a day in 16 years. I was wrong. Mrs. Shen whispered. Take the child away. Mr. Shen looked away, unable to bear to look at the twins next to him. That was the child he devoted all his efforts to. Seeing this change, the old lady Yan stood aside silently. Blessing? It's really a good gift. Mr. Shen chuckled mockingly, shook his sleeves fiercely, turned around and left. Little girl, Uncle Shen owes you this. Mr. Shen looked coldly at the Marquis of Chang'an, and only gave Sushui a big gift. If it weren't for Sushui, I'm afraid he would still be a big grievance and raise a son for someone else. When everyone left, the old lady lowered her face severely. He has a sinister and terrifying face. Do you have any intention at all? You exposed this matter in public. What should your sister do? Have you ever thought about Jiao Xiao? Ms. Li was the first to attack her. She gives people blessings and makes them cuckold, but she's not allowed to tell her. Sushui looked at her in shock. Mr. Shen has never had any children in his life, so what's wrong with having 2 lovely twins now? What's the difference between the twins he's raised by his side since childhood and his own children? Ms. Li lowered her voice. She didn't care whether the other party was Master Shen's child. But this matter had a great impact on Jiao Xiao. She gave people a son and a cuckold. All children who have been blessed by her will be suspected. Has a great influence on Jiao Xiao. Sushui was shocked for the first time by the shamelessness of the Marquis Chang'an mansion. City people are thicker-skinned than country people. Sushui looked scared. Then he looked at her seriously. Do you really think so? The affection that surrounds you is more important than blood. It's good that you think so. I hope you don't regret it. Sushui looked at her deeply. You. Mrs. Li was confused by what she said and immediately frowned. The old lady gave Sushui a hard look. Let's go. Don't waste the time to burn incense. I just hope that all the Yan family members will remember that Jiao Jiao is the hope for the prosperity of the Ho mansion. If anyone does bad things, they will be expelled from the Qingzhen Ho mansion. Sushui's expression remained unchanged as she climbed onto the carriage majestically. Chasing or not chasing me, my eldest brother will try to move his family to Beijing next year, and no one will want to live in your house. The carriage drove away for more than half an hour. When we stopped again, Sushui had already woken up from her sleep. At the end of the year, many noble people went to Hyogyo Temple to offer incense. Many people had already greeted the old lady along the way. Along the way, Sushui was always looked at with vague eyes, and she was not angry. Is this the child? The lady who spoke looked at Sushui wantonly. The fruit is really good. He is unruly and stubborn. He has developed a bad temper in the countryside. He has to bring it back, Mr. Li said with a smile. After coming back for a few months, she never called her mother. It is probably a lie that Mr. Li is not worried. You will always be taught. How well educated is your Jiao Xiao? Your happiness in this life depends on Jiao Xiao. Has Jiao Jiao come to Hyogyo Temple? The lady opposite said with a smile. Her father-in-law did not gather wealth, but after being blessed by Yan Sushui, the money in her hand has tripled. The smile on Li's face was a bit sincere. Here we are, I have been invited by the imperial master to rest in the Zen room. Sushui glanced at her and said, the word greed is like a knife in the head. Money that doesn't belong to you will always be recovered from other places. You can't make money that you shouldn't earn. The lady frowned slightly and glanced at Sushui displeasedly. The imperial master really values her, so he must ask her to raise that lotus again, right? She ignored Sushui. Li Shi smiled and nodded. There is a patch of lotus in the backyard of Hyogyo Temple. It is said that it was planted by the golden lotus seeds under the Bodhisattva of Avalokitesvara, but it has never bloomed because of the lack of spiritual energy in the mortal world. Sure enough, as soon as Chengyan Ho mansion arrived at the gate of Hyogyo Temple, a novice monk came to greet him in person. Only the Marquis mansion has such treatment. The old lady and Mrs. Li walked proudly in front. Only Jiao Jiao can give them such treatment. Sushui looked at the wind chimes under the eaves of Hyogyo Temple and smiled softly. There are actually bells to welcome gods in mortal temples. Sushui was extremely curious. Sure enough, as soon as she approached the gate of Hyogyo Temple. Sudden. The bell that had never rang before suddenly jingled at this moment. The bells in the entire temple were ringing automatically without wind, shaking crazily. At this moment, the old abbot who was meditating in the monastery suddenly opened his eyes. The prayer beads in his hand fell to the ground with a thud. The bell rings to welcome the gods, and the gods come to earth, the abbot murmured. Immediately he stood up from the futon like crazy, stumbled open the door, and rushed out. God comes to the mortal world, God comes to the mortal world. Wow, it blooms in winter. Look, it blooms in winter. Everyone looked at it in surprise and saw that all the flowers and plants in the Hyogyo Temple were blooming and colorful, as if they were welcoming something. The usually calm little novice monk rushed out. The golden lotus has bloomed, abbot, the golden lotus has bloomed. The golden lotus will bear lotus seeds soon. The abbot looked surprised, put his hands together and made a Buddhist salute to the sky. I wonder, which descended to earth and made such a big move. The gods and Buddhas in the Hyogyo Temple were all welcoming the arrival of that god. The entire Hyogyo Temple is welcoming their god. Sushui stood at the door and pinched a flower. She could even feel the joy of the flower. You are still sensible. These old friends are still friendly. She never needs to be welcomed by mortals. Those who greeted her were all gods and Buddhas in the sky. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Shengsheng. Chapter 222. Chapter 222 sees the credit and lose face. The abbot is a person from outside the area. But at this moment, he almost rolled and rushed to the backyard. People outside the country also have their own beliefs. Their belief is Buddha. Now that God is here in person, how can he not be excited? When the abbot opened the courtyard door, he could feel the fragrance of lotus coming to his face, and the air was filled with a faint fragrance. In the lotus pond, white mist filled the air, golden light shone, and golden lotuses bloomed one after another. They are still maturing and will soon bear lotus seeds. The little novice clasped his hands together and knelt on the ground. Today he saw a real miracle. More and more novices came over, and everyone sat beside the lotus pond to meditate. After many years of cultivation, this golden lotus finally bloomed. It is the breath of Buddhism. It is the breath of Buddhism. Some Buddhists shed tears and hurriedly sat cross-legged to chant sutras. I have been raising the lotus for 1,000 years, and finally I am waiting for today. The abbot clasped his hands in front of the lotus pond and saluted. Then he hurried out of the courtyard gate. At this moment, the believers in the courtyard all felt that something was wrong in the Hyogyo temple. The monks of Hyogyo temple are all the most Buddha-like masters selected in the country. They have never even looked at the money for sesame oil, but now they ran towards the backyard with faces full of obsession. What's going on? Why did all the bells in the temple suddenly ring? It's really strange. There is still a faint fragrance of lotus in the air. The courtyard is full of flowers, and all the flowers bloom in the blink of an eye regardless of the season. What's going on? All the nobles could not sit still and walked out of the temple one after another with surprise on their faces. Most of them are the family members of dignitaries. It's a miracle, it's a miracle. Everyone was shocked and knelt down to pray. This is the blessing of Dai Viet, the blessing of Dai Viet. Everyone in the Chinjenho mansion was also frightened. They had some respect in the Hyogyo temple, so they immediately called a monk and asked, "Little master, what happened to you today?" The little novice monk was impatient at first, but seeing that it was the family members of the Marquis of Chang'an, he gave him some respect. It's God who comes in person. This is the bell to welcome the gods. The bell will ring only when the breath of the gods leaks out. The golden lotus in the backyard is the lotus seeds produced on the lotus platform under the guanyin seed. After being raised in the mortal world for thousands of years, it has never blossomed or bear fruit. Today, in the blink of an eye, the golden lotus pond is in full bloom, and the Buddha Dharma is permeating the air. The little novice monk pushed Li away and immediately stumbled towards the backyard. No matter how dignified the monk is, he cannot control his inner joy at this moment. The gods are here in person. Li was stunned for a moment. When everyone heard the sentence, their breathing was stagnant. Real, God. Oh, our little Fubeo came to the Hyogyo temple today. Is it the Jiao girl? The little maid from the home mansion said suddenly, and then she covered her mouth. Don't talk nonsense. Although the imperial master said that Jiao is the goddess of calamity, Jiao is still young, so you can't praise her too much. The calamity is not over yet. The old lady smiled and shook her head. Everyone was stunned. Bride. But Miss Jiao, you did come to the temple today. The maid muttered. Everyone looked at each other and came forward to talk enthusiastically with the Marquis of Shenzhen. Li was surrounded by stars holding the moon in the middle, and the smile on her face became brighter and brighter. Jiao, this child, was born different. When I was pregnant with her, I once dreamed of a white and fat little girl with 2 little crotches. She called me mother, and there was a legend behind her. It's like the Lingxiao Palace. The day she was born, the sky over the capital was filled with red clouds, and the birds above the home mansion were unwilling to leave. It was obviously winter, but all the flowers in the home mansion were in full bloom when she was born. Oh, it seems to be somewhat similar to now. Jiao has been worry-free since she was a child. She didn't like to cry or fuss when she was born. She is such a little person, as if she was born sensible. She doesn't make a fuss when she pees or is hungry. She just makes a few sounds with her little fists outstretched. You are still blessed to be in charge of the Marquis mansion. Originally, The marquis's mansion was in decline, but a little girl was born. Now, in the capital, who doesn't respect the marquis mansion? All the ladies were full of envy. The old marquis is a daring person. He spent his whole life fighting for glory and gained a title in the Cheng'en marquis mansion. But the children in the house are all mediocre people. Now Yan Jiaojiao's father is only the 5th rank Shaoqing of Guanglo Temple. 2 years ago, he was the 5th rank Shaoqing. It was the late emperor who promoted Yan Jiaojiao's official position for Yan Jiaojiao's sake. It is true that one person attains enlightenment and a chicken or a dog ascends to heaven. There was a woman among them who looked at everyone mysteriously. I'm going to tell you something, but please don't tell anyone else today. I'm telling you something for the sake of our little goddess. I heard that the reason why the late emperor pampered Jiaojiao so much was because he had a fairy dream before Jiaojiao was born. It is said that a goddess came down to earth to cope with the calamity it will bring prosperity to Dai Viet for thousands of years, and if the little goddess succeeds in the calamity, His Majesty will be able to ascend to immortality. My relative is on duty in the palace and is close to the late emperor. He said this after he drank too much. Everyone listened with half-belief. But the late emperor really doted on Yan Jiaojiao so much that even the princess had to step aside. Whenever it comes to sacrifices, Yan Jiaojiao must be the first. Even the late emperor was half a step behind her. Li Shi coughed lightly. Speaking of it, this child does have many special qualities. Even the birds and beasts favor her. Li gradually got lost in everyone's gaze. Why don't we go ahead and take a look? With such a big movement, Miss Yan must be coming out. Yan Jiaojiao has given many blessings in recent years and is recognized as a blessing. But the people who can be blessed by her are all extremely prominent people. At this moment, most of the people in this temple have only heard of their names and have never been given one. Li was held up by everyone, with a deep smile on her face. Okay, let's go and have a look. The imperial master often invites Jiaojiao to chant sutras for Jin Lian. I guess it has an effect. The group of people headed towards the lotus pond in a mighty manner. Before they got close, everyone felt calm when they saw the faint Buddha light. I am more envious of the splashing weather in Qingzhen Haofu. Sushui stood in the corner, and no one in the Qingzhenhou mansion noticed her. Sushui curled her lips. Hey, if you can take advantage of me, I lose. Sushui thought for a while, turned around and entered the main hall. There are numerous bodhisattvas enshrined in the main hall. The little guy was wearing a lot of clothes and rolled over the high threshold. There is no one in the hall at this moment. I saw that the tall golden bodhisattva actually showed a faint shadow. Many gods showed their after-images, and the whole hall was filled with terrifying pressure. 2 mortal birds rolled their eyes and landed on the ground. Many gods were seen coming down from the altar one after another. Performed a Buddhist salute to her. The goddess is here, welcome the goddess. Although she is naughty, her identity is that she is the daughter of heaven. Many gods are under her. In the entire divine world, no one would be disrespectful to her when they saw her. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Shengsheng. Chapter 223. Chapter 223, Entrustment from the Buddhist World. Sushui put her hands behind her back. With a slight wave of his hand, many shadows stood up. There is no need to be too polite. Sushui has been receiving gifts from God since she was a child, and she doesn't feel anything wrong at all. Those 2 mortal birds have become somewhat human, and their eyes are almost straight now. Were you the ones who felt Sushui's aura and came out to greet her? As soon as Sushui approached Hyogyo Temple, the divine aura filled the air. When the goddess comes in person, it is natural that she should show her kindness to the landlord. At this moment, many shadows dispersed, only the in the center took the form of a human. Transformed into a simple and unpretentious woman, with kind brows and warm eyes. It seemed as if those eyes were full of compassion. But if someone with an evil mind looks into it, they will see an abyss and a huge beast in the abyss. It seems as if it will be swallowed up by the moment. Bodhisattva Sushui clasped her hands towards the Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva smiled and bowed to her. Does the Bodhisattva miss Sushui? In fact, Sushui also misses everyone. When the calamity is over, Sushui will be the first to come to the Buddhist world to visit everyone. The smile on the Bodhisattva's face froze slightly. No, no, we didn't mean that. Sushui misses the days of living in the Buddhist world. Sushui sighed, her tone full of nostalgia. She was too naughty in the shrine, so the god sent her to the Buddhist world to be nurtured. The expression on Bodhisattva's face was almost unbearable. Poor myself, I am afraid that I will lose all of her. Ever since Sushui was born, she has often suffered from insomnia. Ever since I went to the Buddhist world, listening to the Buddhas knocking wooden fish every day, Sushui has become quite sleepy. The Bodhisattva said nothing, as if he remembered the fear of being dominated by her again. Do you understand? She couldn't sleep, so she randomly selected a Bodhisattva to knock on the wooden fish to lull her to sleep. Or, she randomly selected a Bodhisattva, gave her a sheet of music, and used a wooden fish to play the music. Many gods and Buddhas have gone through untold hardships to become saints. In those 3 days, half of their merits were lost. She is a wise person. Once, they tried to influence her. Finally, the saintly ancestor of the Buddhist world was sent away. Actually, the poor monk came here today to ask for something. The Bodhisattva sighed and did not dare to mention it to her anymore. Before descending to earth, many monks warned her and asked her not to talk to her. If you say more than a few words, you will be offended and your merit will be lost. This matter is still a matter for the holy ancestor of the Buddhist world. The holy ancestor rules the entire Buddhist world. After the holy ancestor descended to earth and endured calamities, he has never returned, and even the Buddhist world cannot feel his breath. This can only mean that the holy ancestor has not yet escaped into Buddhism, and the Buddhist world has made predictions about this. The holy ancestor now appears in this world. I ask the goddess to find it for Buddhism. Looking for the holy ancestor? Yes, I hope the goddess can make it happen. If this can happen, the Buddhist world will owe you once. Sushui nodded, and the other party didn't thank him again and again until he agreed. The Bodhisattva's figure was slightly sluggish, and when he was about to disperse, his lips moved. There was a bit of solemnity and hesitation in his eyes, and then he sighed and whispered, "Goddess, please don't move, otherwise, you will be doomed." Sui didn't hear clearly what she was moving. After saying that, it turned into a burst of golden light and dispersed. As if it had never existed. Sushui blinked her eyes, doomed. What is the end of the world? Turn around and forget about it? The little girl jumped out of the hall and headed towards the lotus pond. The outside of the lotus pond was crowded with people kneeling around the golden lotus. The golden lotus in the center had slowly grown a lotus pod. A man of extraordinary splendor, who looked like a banished immortal, stood behind Yan Jiaoqiao. It seems as if it is not living in the world, as if it is ready to ride on the wind at any time. A head of white hair blows in the wind. I saw that he was completely cold, as if he was outside the world. Only when he saw Yan Jiaoqiao, his eyes were a little gentle. In order to divine the location of the goddess, his strength was weakened by half. The reincarnated is too powerful to be detected by humans. Golden lotuses can only be nurtured by spiritual energy and divine will. The flowers here are surrounded by flowers that bloom out of season. It can be seen that they all feel your breath. The national master's face was slightly pale, and his fingertips were trembling slightly. I will use all my strength to heal your wounds. Jiaojiao, you have to walk the rest of the way on your own. The national master patted her shoulder gently. Sure enough, Yan Jiao's ulcerated cheeks were smooth and clean. The skin is like a shelled egg. Jiao understands. This road must be full of loneliness, Yan Jiao whispered. The golden lotus is ripe and ready to be picked, the national master said calmly. The abbot stood up and said, let the poor monk do it. The imperial master frowned slightly, but he knew the importance of the golden lotus to every Buddhist disciple, so he said nothing. The abbot was seen clasping his hands together, approaching the golden lotus, and gently touching the lotus pod with his hands. Even before he got close, he could feel the strength in his body passing away little by little. Catch the lotus pods with both hands. The abbot was stunned. Abbot, stop, the young novice shouted immediately. The abbot suddenly let go. The body fell directly to the ground. Fortunately, the young novice acted quickly and caught him. I saw that the abbot had aged at least 10 years visibly to the naked eye. How could this happen? The imperial master sighed softly. The golden lotus is the lotus seed grown on the lotus platform under the guanyin seed. It has extremely strong spiritual energy. When the golden lotus is growing, mortals are not allowed to pick it. The abbot has meritorious deeds and has little influence, it's just that he can't bear the aura of the golden lotus. If an ordinary person touches it, he will be over 50 in the blink of an eye. If he touches it for one more breath, he will be buried directly, the national master said indifferently. Many nobles moved back silently. It is true that not everyone can touch the magical things. The imperial master looked cold to everyone, but when he looked at Yan Jiao, he felt much warmer. Jiao, only you here can pick that golden lotus. Go. The abbot looked deeply at the imperial master and frowned slightly. He could see that the glory of the imperial master had dissipated and he was now just an ordinary person. His merits and accomplishments are all gone. Yan Jiao has gained a bit of flesh during this time and looks a little more delicate and naive. She said sweetly to the imperial master, Master, Jiao will definitely live up to her mission. She had already worshipped the imperial master as her teacher. The imperial master nodded slightly. Li Shi straightened her back slightly, and the entire Qingzhenhou mansion was filled with honor. Yan Jiao stepped forward step by step. The little girl was obviously only 5 years old, but she always dressed in extremely light clothes, as if she wanted to look like a fairy. Yan Sushui is the opposite of her. She likes all brightly colored things. She was born a goddess and has full confidence. No matter what she wears, it does not affect her status. Yan Jiao's lips curled up slightly, getting closer to Jin Lian. Yan Sushui, so what if you are a goddess? In this life, I have long taken away your identity and your destiny. Your followers are mine, your parents are mine, and even the imperial master has sacrificed everything for me. Have you seen it? Even the gods and Buddhas in the gods regard me as you. Yan Jiao stretched out her hand towards Jin Lian. The moment her little hand touched the lotus stem, the entire lotus pond suddenly changed. It came so fast and violently that no one reacted. End of this chapter. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Sheng. Chapter 224. Chapter 224, Little Fubao is embarrassed. Only gods can pick this golden lotus. Qingzhenhou mansion is really a good place for ancestors. You are a blessed one. It's more useful to have a daughter than to have 10 sons, everyone complimented Mrs. Li in a low voice. Li suffered a sense of frustration from Yan Sushui, and her pride at this moment was indescribable. The moment Yan Jiao touched the lotus stem with her hands, the smile on her face faltered slightly. I saw that the originally glorious lotus pond seemed to be stained by something. In a blink of an eye, the entire lotus pond's fairy energy dispersed, and the golden light dissipated. The lotus flowers in the pond dropped their petals one after another, and the fallen petals turned into light little by little and disappeared before everyone's eyes. The golden light disappeared little by little. Just in the blink of an eye, the entire lotus pond withered. The mature golden lotus in Yan Jiao's hand was the worst. The entire plant turned black and withered, turning into a dead flower. The whole audience was shocked. It happened so fast that no one had time to react. Yan Jiao was stunned on the spot. With a slight movement of her fair hand, the black golden lotus turned into ashes. At this moment, the light in the eyes of all the monks was extinguished. How could this happen? The prayer beads in the abbot's hand fell to the ground with a clatter. The prayer beads were scattered on the ground and rolled everywhere. How could this happen? The golden lotus is in full bloom, the lotus seeds are ripe, and suddenly, this lotus pond has existed for thousands of years. It has not bloomed, produced fruits, or withered for thousands of years. How could it happen now? The little novice monk's eyes turned red. This lotus pond has been the belief of all the monks in Hyogyo temple for thousands of years. She's not a fake, is she? A lady couldn't help but say. After speaking, he suddenly came back to his senses and covered his mouth tightly. But these words made people couldn't help but look at Yan Jiao and think more. I heard that a twin sister from the marquis has returned. This was only half of what he said. Everyone knows that the one who finally found the marquis has never acknowledged her in public. This shows the eccentricity of the Haofu. Yan Jiao felt her heart was hit hard. She also heard everyone's comments and was suspicious, but she didn't dare to show any signs of strangeness and swallowed the fishy smell in her mouth. Why? Once she comes back, she can easily destroy everything she worked so hard to build. She turned around with tears in her eyes and looked at the imperial master innocently. Master, disciple is afraid. Is it because Jiao is not worthy of being a goddess? Is it because Jiao is too indifferent to her fellow sisters and has made the gods dislike her? Yan Jiao looked innocent. The imperial master frowned slightly, held her hand and asked her to stand behind him. He blocked the abbot's gaze. The abbot took a deep breath and looked at the imperial master. It's not your fault. Even my fellow sisters will be jealous of your existence. After all, you are a unique and doting little goddess in the world. The national master patted her gently, trying to reassure her. But his brows furrowed slightly. What went wrong? There has been an unexpected incident in the temple. Please disperse. The Hyogyo temple will be closed for 3 days. Please come back in 3 days. The abbot turned his head and said to everyone. The monks calmed down their emotions and personally escorted everyone out of the temple. But no one noticed that the Stoic masters didn't look good. Their faith is gone. Directly in front of them, it disappeared into ashes. Chen Yinho's residence is here to stay. The abbot nodded slightly to Mrs. Li. Mr. Li's face turned pale slightly. She looked at Yan Jiao and felt a little uneasy in her heart. The old lady was also full of concern. I didn't notice at all that there was another 5-year-old girl in the house who never followed me. Jiao, you go to Mrs. Li first. Master will come to find you later. After the national master finished speaking, he hurriedly followed the abbot into the Zen courtyard. The door of the Zen room is closed. The coldness on the abbot's face fell. What about your merits? What about your cultivation? Are you really sure it's her? What should you do if something goes wrong? Is your waiting for hundreds of years really final? The abbot looked at him steadily. The national master has always had a close relationship with the Hyogyo temple. Externally, the national preceptor and the abbot often discuss Buddhism. In fact, privately the abbot has always respected the imperial master. A few years ago, the abbot discovered that there has always been a person in the Hyogyo temple, appearing in every generation, while looking through the books of the Hyogyo temple. First generation. Second generation. The third generation, the fourth generation and the fifth generation. The inheritance book of Hyogyo temple will record the people of each generation who have made significant contributions to the temple. They will also describe their faces. As for the national preceptor, he exists in every generation. But every time he was recorded, he was kept secretive and his existence was never mentioned. The abbot didn't know how long he had existed, he only knew that he was looking for someone aimlessly. Huiwen, you are still as good-tempered as when you were a child. You are the abbot, but you have to achieve all four things. The imperial master glanced at him and walked to the window. I saw that the flowers in the courtyard were withering rapidly. It's her, I'm sure it's her. The imperial master sighed lowly. Actually, I was sure it was her back then. Her aura has always been different from that of all gods. How could I admit that she was wrong when she came? And in the past few years, her aura has often leaked out, and I have never missed it. The national master waved his hand. It's just that, something seems to have gone wrong. The imperial master rubbed his brows. Tiandeo, who had obviously favored her in the past, had seriously injured her several times. What about that golden lotus just now? When she touched it, the whole pond of lotus flowers fell. The imperial master chuckled lightly. Huineng, if you care about that golden lotus, I will give you a big bag after she returns to her throne. She has eaten up the lotus seed of the Bodhisattva. The abbot sighed. Perhaps it's because she hasn't returned to her position yet, and the aura of the gods is not strong enough. It's just a golden lotus, nothing. The imperial preceptor is a little tired. He has stayed in the mortal world for too long, and there is not much cultivation and merit left in him. Now that all of it is given to Yan Jiaoxiao, he will also experience birth, old age, illness, and death like a mortal. The abbot frowned. In fact, he always felt that Yan was delicate and did not look like a goddess. She has already made it obvious she can summon the phantoms of gods for birth predictions, annual sacrifices, and annual summons to gods. No one in the world can do it except her. There are 3 days left before the ceremony to summon the gods, just watch it. Maybe it was her compatriot sister who influenced her. There was a hint of indifference in the eyes of the national master. He looked indifferent to everyone except Yan Jiaoxiao. Everything was going well for Jiaoxiao, but since the news about her sister came out, accidents have happened frequently. She is soft-hearted after all, and her sister has affected her mood. She wants to be close to her sister. She is ignorant, but she is jealous of everything. Jiaojiao has a look of awe flashed in the eyes of the imperial master. The imperial master chuckled lightly and pushed the door open. Outside the door, a chubby little girl was tiptoeing past the door. The imperial master paused in his steps. When he saw Sushui, his heart beat suddenly, painfully, and violently. The imperial master gently held his heart, his eyes locked on Sushui. Sushui's waist is bent, and even the round bulging clothes she wears can't block her protruding belly. The little girl didn't expect to meet anyone, so she looked at him in shock. A slippery fish slipped out of her bulging cotton-padded jacket. It wags its tail and jumps on the ground. The atmosphere suddenly became silent. This koi was raised in the wishing pond. The imperial master's eyelids twitched. He was so crazy that he almost regarded this little thief as a goddess. It's not like this. The goddess in his memory shouldn't be like this. She has never been so greedy. She is pure, cold, and arrogant. She is the proudest orchid on the top of the sacred mountain. Don't touch it, don't look directly at it. The imperial master turned around and left without hesitation. Sushui turned around and glanced at him. It's strange, I've never seen it before, but the smell looks familiar. End of this chapter. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Shengsheng. Chapter 225. Chapter 225. Yanita Kyo's warning. Yan Jiaojiao was suspected. She picked golden lotuses at the Hyuguo temple, which caused the lotuses in the pond to be destroyed instantly, and everyone spread the news. Once back in Beijing, Mr. Shen was cuckolded, and the twin sons were not his own. This incident even caused a stir. Back then, Xiao Fuebao personally blessed Mrs. Shen. What kind of blessing does she give? Does she give someone an adulterer if she can't conceive? Then, will all the children born with her blessing have problems? Aren't they all born to adulterers? This matter caused quite a stir, and the woman who had given her a child was crying and fussing at the gate of the Marquis of Qingzhen's mansion, holding her child in her arms. The Marquis must give us an explanation for this matter. We just came here to ask for a child. Now the outside world suspects that we have an adulterer. I can't get this reputation anymore. Qingzhenho Mansion, come out. Yan Xiao, come out. 7 or 8 women, holding their children, stood in the Marquis Qingzhen's mansion and cried. The women were crying and cursing. Not only them, there are also many servants watching secretly. After all, there are quite a few infertile men among these dignitaries. It was only because of Yan Jiao's blessing that she became pregnant with an heir. When Mrs. Li came back from Huguo Temple, everyone blocked the door. It's ridiculous and shameless, they didn't behave like this when they were pregnant with the child. Back then they even beat gongs and drums to deliver a plaque to the Marquis mansion, and said they would be Jiao's followers for the rest of their lives, they would enshrine a golden body to Jiao. With a pale face, Yan Jiao asked her servants to carry the sedan to the Marquis residence. Yan Jiao, come out. Now my husband suspects that the child is not hers. Come out and explain. There was a woman with her hair disheveled and holding a babbling child in her arms. The servant stopped the woman, but the woman rushed towards Yan Jiao's sedan like she was crazy. My husband wants to divorce me, come out. The women who had been given children by her were now being roasted on the fire. Aren't you a goddess? Come out. Go away. What does Mrs. Shen's unruly behavior have to do with my son? Mrs. Li immediately scolded her angrily. You got an advantage and behaved yourself. You are all destined to be destitute. It was Jiao who gave you children. Mrs. Li was so angry that her face turned red, blaming Yan Sushui for that dead girl. As soon as she came back, she caused turmoil in the Marquis mansion. It is indeed a disaster star. Yan Jiao, you're hurting us, you're hurting us. Women's reputations are so important that they are now under suspicion. How can they live a good life? Yan Jiao was surrounded by servants. She had just gotten off the sedan and was about to enter the mansion. The woman with disheveled hair had a hard look on her face, as the child in her arms was crying loudly. Sushui saw her eyes falling on the child. The little guy's eyes narrowed, and he immediately covered his nose and jumped away quickly. The moment of jumping away. I'll fight with you. The woman grabbed something yellow and orange and threw it at Yan Jiao. Suddenly, a strange smell spread out. Vomit. Eat shit. I'm not good looking, and you won't be able to live well if I'm divorced, the woman scolded angrily, and threw the child's filth directly onto Yan Jiao. Yan Jiao's miserable screams could not be heard without stopping. It was also accompanied by bouts of retching. Yan Jiao cried and screamed, suppressing the murderous look in her eyes. Hurry up and arrest her. Mrs. Li covered her nose and brought the collapsed Yan Jiao, who was covered in filth, into the Marquis mansion while feeling nauseated. Yan Jiao collapsed, her whole body trembling uncontrollably. The old lady felt distressed and disgusted, so she hurriedly took her dirty hand and protected her into the house. Sushui curled her lips. What does this mean? It's just interest. Sushui followed her arrogantly to go in. The women who were crazy about killing looked at her and asked, are you from the home mansion too? Sushui said calmly, if you don't let me include the genealogy, does it count? That group of women let her in. As soon as she entered the house, the grandmother in front of the old lady said, the old lady asked you to kneel in the ancestral hall. The grandmother's eyes were sharp. I am her junior uncle, why should she let me kneel down? How long can the title of little master uncle protect you? You haven't entered the family tree of the Marquis mansion yet. Without entering the family tree, she would always be a wild child. Who cares? She saved the whole town in Xiashan, and the Xiashan County Chronicle gave her a separate page. Wang Jiakan, she was the first composer in the village. Are you curious about the genealogy of Qingzhenhou mansion? You, just wait for the old lady to deal with you. Sushui is not afraid at all. At night, before the old marquis came back, Sushui was called to the main courtyard. When she passed by, her father, whom she had never met, and Mrs. Li were already there. The room was filled with a sweet fragrance, and it was estimated that Yan Jiaojiao had applied a lot of powder. Kneel down. Before Sushui could enter the door, the man in official uniform shouted sharply. In his arms was Yan Jiaojiao, who was sobbing softly. It was really a mistake to bring you back. It's okay to be born into a marquis's house and not seek the interests of the marquis's house. Instead, you expose the shortcomings of the marquis's house time and time again. Are you the kind of person who would do this to your own sister? Jiao Jiao knew you were coming back and looked forward to it day and night, but she didn't expect you to be such a virtuous person. Are you worthy of Ho Fu and Jiao Jiao? You have only been back for a few months, and you have already made the capital a mess. You are really spoiled. The young man looked at Sushui dissatisfied. Sushui understood that this was her biological father whom she could not figure out. Admit your mistake to Jiao Jiao. Don't always be jealous of Jiao Jiao in the future. Jiao Jiao is a goddess. Being able to raise her is a blessing to the Ho family. Don't try to compare with Jiao Jiao. Although you are the sister of the same mother, it's different from Jiao Jiao. What's the difference? Is it because you have no talent or virtue and rely on your daughter to get promoted? Sushui grasped the key point and asked immediately. Directly made the righteous and cheap father look livid with anger. He is most afraid of others saying that he relied on his daughter to get promoted. The more guilty you feel, the more afraid you are of others telling you. Besides, it's not me who wiped on her face, so what does it have to do with me? She still has to call me sister-in-law. Can she bear it if I kneel down to her? The man gets angrier. Should you kneel or not? Today, your father is leaving Beijing. Don't think that anyone can protect you. Everyone in the house looked at her with serious eyes. You think I want to come back? A blessed daughter will not enter an unlucky home. I don't want to go back to the Marquis mansion yet. At this moment, several strong nuns in the surrounding area were faintly approaching Sushui. How dare you? Yu was shocked. Old God, Sushui pointed to the sky. Let me tell you, there is someone above me. Yan Yan frowned. Are you referring to His Majesty? Even though he is the emperor, I can't control him. I will educate my daughter. Besides, we are the only ones in the house today. Who can see it? Someone, let her kneel down. Several ladies came forward immediately. Yu is ready. Sushui waved her hand. Come down. The words just fell. I saw the empty main hall of the Ho mansion, filled with people. A large group of men in black holding long knives. Yan Yan? The beams of the Ho mansion did not collapse? Sushui looked innocent. Literally, there's someone above me. Jia Jia left her the Emperor Shenjiayuan's order, which commanded Shenjiayuan's 100,000 strong army. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Shengsheng. Chapter 226. Chapter 226, Severing Relations with the Ho Mansion. There is someone above me. Who has ever thought about it? Because of these words, the beams of Qingzhenhou mansion were filled with people. The old lady was frightened and fainted by the large number of men in black who appeared in front of her. Yan Yan was so angry that he was shaking all over, pointing at her and unable to say a word. Your life is cheap, but my life is very precious. You don't think that I dare to stay in the wolf's den and let you bully me, do you? Sushui looked surprised. I am already 5 years old, and I am not 3 years old. Sushui spat. I am young, but not stupid. He said, pointing to his head, this is a head full of wisdom, not just a decoration. You, I don't have a daughter like you, get out of here. Yan Yan gritted his teeth. He had always been a prosperous master Yan outside. His mistreatment of his daughter today was seen by outsiders, how could he not complain? Jiao Jiao is the backbone of the Qingzhenhou mansion and the backbone of the Hou mansion. Nothing can happen to her. You can only give up Yan Sui Sui. She is in the Marquis mansion, and I don't know how much trouble she will cause Jiao Jiao. There are still 3 days to summon the gods. The Hou mansion will never let you ruin Jiao Jiao's good deeds and ruin the face of the Hou mansion. From now on, my Yan family will not have a daughter like you. Today, I will expel you from the Yan family. Yan Yan breathed heavily, not like a father at all. That's right, what he is protecting at the moment is the interests of the Hou mansion, which is the magic weapon for his promotion. I want to see what kind of trouble you can make without the Marquis mansion. Yan Yan clenched his teeth, and there was no father-daughter love in his eyes. Dad. Yan Jiao Jiao gently pulled her father's sleeve. Li Shi frowned. Jiao Jiao, you are still soft-hearted and you still speak for her. You treat her as a sister, but does she treat you as a sister? Mrs. Li sighed and wanted to hold Jiao Jiao in her arms. Jiao Jiao, however, leaned on her father's arms and did not want to go. You have been close to your father since you were a child. Mrs. Li felt sour in her heart. This girl had been close to Yan Yan since she was a child, which made her feel a little uncomfortable as a mother. Daddy is your biological father, Yan Jiao Jiao muttered. Mother is also my mother. Mrs. Li laughed and scolded her. The family of 3 was enjoying themselves happily, but Sushui's eyes were full of interest. You go away. I will treat you as my daughter from now on. When you see me, you don't have to call me daddy. When I see you, I won't pay attention to you. From now on, the Hou mansion will sever ties with you. Yan Yan waved her sleeves and saw the group of men in black protecting her, as if she were a ferocious beast. Moreover, before entering Beijing, she already had the status of princess. Also met the emperor. She became Mr. Lu's younger junior sister and her old father's younger junior uncle. Start the game big at the beginning. Yan Yan didn't even want to think that if he had lived for decades, it would be worse than her living in the countryside. Yan Jiao Jiao hid in Yan Yan's arms and raised the corners of her lips slightly without anyone noticing. Your biological parents kicked you out of the house, what can you do to me? Sushui narrowed her eyes, don't grin so wide, be careful of throwing dirt into your mouth. After saying that, he turned around and went out neatly. As soon as I went out, I heard Yu's voice behind me. The 2 birds were still jumping on the shoulders. Why is it so smelly? Why is it so smelly? Who is eating shit? Yan Jiao Jiao's crying cry of collapse sounded again. Her father and mother beside her were coaxing her. Sushui lowered her eyes slightly. Enjoy your last warm moments. Sushui took people to Kishinai Yuan. Take off the plaque and leave nothing to her. Even though the Qingzhenhou mansion is such a big mansion, it actually supports many people and the monthly expenses are huge. Just as he was talking, Mrs. Li came. Mrs. Li's face was gloomy. When she saw Sushui, she suppressed her anger and said, if you are willing to admit your mistake to Jiao Jiao and submit to me, I will beg for you and let you stay. Sushui lowered her eyes and ignored her at all. Li is angry. The old lady just gave me the order. Since you want to leave, you must leave with dignity. You can't take away even a shred of the Marquis's residence. After Mrs. Li finished speaking, she stood directly at the door. He was actually trying to prevent Sushui from taking away the property of the Hou mansion. If Sushui is really a 5-year-old child, I'm afraid my heart will be cold. Mr. Li was followed by many servants, all watching the move in the courtyard. Ms. Li thought that sooner or later she would have to suffer some hardships before she could come back and admit her mistake. Let her go out and suffer some hardships. The little money she brought was probably not enough to buy a house. The mother and daughter were so indifferent that they were worse than strangers. Ayu brought over a small oven and placed roasted sweet and glutinous chestnuts and sweet potatoes on it. Sushui sat unceremoniously at the entrance of Kishan temple, eating tea and feeling quite contented under the snowy scenery. There was never any embarrassment at all. Ayu chuckled, her aura of nobility was natural, a magnanimity that the mud-legged Haufa could not cultivate. Even Mr. Li would feel suffocated and short of breath in front of her. Li took a step back, unwilling to admit that she was inferior to her maids. Ayu took out a booklet. The ground of the marquee mansion was bare. The girl found it uncomfortable for her feet, so she changed the cobblestones on the ground into emeralds. Go and dig out the emerald road. There is a cobblestone path in Kishan temple, which is now completely paved with jade. The girl disliked the dimness of the candles in the marquee mansion, so she changed the candles into night light pearls. Go and dig out the night glow pearls from the lantern. The girl thought the bed in the marquee mansion was too hard, so she specially made a bed out of golden sandalwood, which is worth 1,000 taels. Go and carry it out. The girl felt that the tents in the marquee mansion were rustic, so she embroidered the mosquito nets with gold thread instead. Go and take down the mosquito nets. The girl thought the decorations in the courtyard were tacky, so she specially replaced them with deep-sea corals and took them away. The girl felt that the Bodhi tree in the courtyard was not blooming, so she specially made a crystal-clear emerald tree with emeralds and gems. If a few more people come, this thing is worth 100,000 taels of silver, it must not be damaged. Ayu held the booklet, read one sentence, and then lifted it out. Not long after, the servants of the marquee mansion were already surrounding Kishan courtyard. Even Ms. Li was so shocked that her eyes widened. 100,000 taels to build a tree. At this moment, the tree was carried out by everyone. Under the snow, it reflected a faint green color, like a small bud in early spring. Beautiful and full of hidden luxury. Li took a breath, her cheeks hurting. Emerald. An emerald the size of a pigeon egg costs 3,000 taels of silver. This prodigal son actually built a tree and it was covered with rubies. More than 100,000, if it is auctioned, it will be no less than 150,000. Even if you are one of the top wealthy families in the capital, you would not dare to be so extravagant. She didn't even know when Yan Sushui brought these things in. The original ornaments of the home mansion were now thrown at the foot of the wall like scraps of metal. Nobody cares. Li took a breath. Because of her charming words, she now got a lot of benefits. But after so many years of savings, it only amounts to 6 shops and 40,000 taels of silver. And all her belongings cannot buy a tree in her yard. Mr. Li's eyes are red. Her daughter living in the countryside seems to be better than everyone else in the capital. They are all rich. He was kicked out of the house in embarrassment. Non-existent. She is an out-and-out rich woman. She was afraid that the marquis would take advantage of her, so she kept covering it up. Now, let yourself go. End of this chapter. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Shengsheng. Chapter 227. Chapter 227, A Letter of Severance. Countless treasures were moved out like water. Li's eyelids trembled. She had been the head wife of the marquee mansion for many years and had never seen such wealth. How did she know that Sushui's adoptive mother, Ms. Lin, brought money from all over the place to Sushui, and she thought she was really a baby being raised in a golden nest. The belongings in the front have already left the door, and the belongings in the back are still in the courtyard. Like a long dragon. At this time, All the people in the Chinjenho mansion were standing under the corridor, looking at them in amazement. The group of branches took a breath. I've never heard that a girl from the countryside is so rich. She leaked a little bit of it between her fingers, and we couldn't finish it in a year. Her adoptive mother's house is mining stones in the countryside, isn't it? The young girl who spoke was the legitimate daughter of the second wife, with a bit of envy in her eyes at this moment. She has only 32 months of silver for 1 month. Standing next to her is a 3 or 4-year-old boy, who is her younger brother. At this moment, everyone was watching her go out. Sister Sushui, what do you do at home in the countryside? The little guy didn't understand the conflicts between adults, so he asked everyone's confusion. Seeing that the young master had a mouthful of crumbs, Ayu immediately bowed and replied, the girl's family has a small income, but they only own a few continuous jadeite mines. And those jade mines are all in the girl's house. The lady and the master love the girl and keep all the money they make in the girl's name. I made some money in my house and had nowhere to spend it, so I bought a lot of shops. And our shop buying is not like other shops, so I just buy one. Our house is one street after another, and the whole street is our own operation. Ayu pursed her lips. In just 1 year, the Yan family's wealth had reached an immeasurable level. My wife has said that no matter how poor she is, she can't bear to have Sushui, and no matter how miserable she is, she can't bear to suffer for her daughter. Gold and silver mountains are all given to Sushui. The whole family's belongings are all in the girl's name now. She has jade mines, dozens of streets, hundreds of acres of land, hot spring villas, etc. Everyone's eyes widened. Shops in one street after another? Hundreds of acres of land? Have a mine at home? Li's face was green and white. You are really on guard against our Marquis's house. He is so scheming at such a young age. Ayu chuckled, Mrs. Li is so boring. On the first day she came to Beijing, she said she had brought some local specialties from her family and the rough stones she dug out. She told Madame early in the morning. A tree in the girls' courtyard is worth hundreds of thousands, every table is made of jade, the ground is paved with jade, and the lanterns are filled with night pearls. Mrs. Li, our girl has never concealed anything? If Mrs. Madam should know that she has entered the girl's yard once and cared about her once. Mrs. Li has not visited her daughter in person for several months since she returned home. Madam, she said that a mother is kind and her son is filial. Ayu covered her mouth and chuckled. Mr. Li was so angry that she almost fell down. Go away, go away. Don't come back after you leave. Don't think that just because your adoptive mother's family is rich, you can dominate. They are just some nouveau riche. Merchants are the most despicable. Ms. Li's body trembled slightly. Ayu took a breath and looked at her in surprise. Madam, you really don't care about your girl. The girl's eldest brother is 16 years old. He has passed the Jiwen examination and will go to Beijing next year. The girl's second brother is 14 years old and is already a 4th-grade loyal military general. Compared with your husband, Lord Yan is 1 level higher. The girl's third brother is only 7 or 8 years old. Now he has managed Miss Sushui's property very well and is on par with the imperial merchants. Next year, I am afraid that the world's richest businessman will have to change his family. Auma just saying one sentence will bring gasps of cold air from everyone in the home mansion. The 3 young masters in the house all love Miss Sushui to their bones. They work very hard to keep her from being humble and asking for help. Li's body was shaking, and her eyes were dizzy. She pinched her palms tightly to hold on and not fall down. This is really a fake thing for her. However, you did remind us. Mrs. Lin knows that you are going to abandon the girl again, and she feels very sad. After all, you have a biological mother. Back then, you abandoned the girl once, and now you have called her back and abandoned her twice. Mrs. Lin feels distressed. You may have violated the girl, and ask someone to send you a letter of divorce. Since you want to break up, let's break up. Clean. Yu smiled and immediately took out a piece of renunciation letter. Ms. Li's face turned slightly pale, and when she was about to speak, someone jumped over her and directly lifted the letter of renunciation. Right, the old lady propped herself up and looked at Yan Sushui with malicious eyes. The future of the home mansion depends on Yan Jiaoqiao, and she can naturally tell what is more important. At this moment, Ms. Li felt a little scared, and there was a trace of uneasiness in her bones. Mother. Think about Jiaoqiao, how much anger did Jiaoqiao suffer from her? Think about the home mansion. Before she came to the home mansion was at its peak in recent years, and Brother Yan was promoted one after another. Look at it now. The status of the home mansion is in jeopardy. If Jiaoqiao is questioned, you should weigh it yourself, the old lady said sternly. Li immediately pursed her lips and stopped trying to stop him. That's what mother said. Cut off books and sever all relations. Sushui doesn't matter from beginning to end, because he has no love, so he never cares. She had never expected it either. Although she was abandoned since she was a child, her family gave her enough family affection. She is not a poor person who has nothing and is looking forward to some maternal love from her biological parents. She is rich. From spiritual to material aspects, the Yan family has never lacked her. Sushui has long since learned to write her own name. Although the word Sushui is a bit difficult, she has learned it at least. The old lady personally signed the letter of renunciation on behalf of her son, and Ms. Li wrote her name with trembling hands. Sui's signature and stamp. She could clearly see that the connection between herself and the Marquis Chenjen's mansion was cut off by an invisible sharp blade amidst the vast power of heaven. Sushui felt happy, and the home mansion would not be able to take advantage of her luck in the future. I just hope that from now on, we will have nothing to do with each other. We will never see each other, Li murmured in a low voice. The baby with a childish expression looked at her deeply. I have one thing to tell Mrsli. Yeah, she never called her mother. In her past, she had already been accompanied by another woman who treated her like a treasure. On February 15th every year, I hope Mrsli can eat fast and recite the Buddha's name. It's best to recite the Purana Sutra twice more. It will be good for my wife. Sushui glanced at her. Li frowned and said, of course not. Every year on the 15th day of the first lunar month, Jiaoqiao is born, and the prominent people in the city come to celebrate. Jiaoqiao said that the 15th day of the first lunar month is for outsiders, and on the 15th day of the second lunar month she invites her relatives, friends, and children come together. It will be a happy day in the house. Every year on that day, you have to drink a few drinks. Sushui was startled for a moment. Celebrating on that day, you are, really big-hearted. I just hope you don't regret it. After saying that, he turned around and left. Fools don't know themselves. End of this chapter. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Shengsheng. Chapter 228. Chapter 228. Milk Baby sitting on the dragon throne. She was kicked out. Yan Yan held a cup of hot tea in his hand, and the rising smoke made it difficult to see his expression. Have you cried bitterly? Have you regretted and begged for mercy? Yan Yan lowered his eyes and asked. The attendant knelt on the ground, frowned slightly, opened his mouth, and after a while said slowly, she just left the house. The old lady of Shangshu mansion waited outside the door with everyone in the mansion, and invited her to stay for a while. There is also Mr. Shen, the minister of Dali Temple, who is also waiting outside the door. There is also a junior member of Lu Ji's family who is outside the door. I would like to invite her to stay for a while. The three parties argued endlessly, and finally, in the end, someone from the palace personally came to pick him up and took him into the palace. There was silence in the hall for a long time, and no one spoke for a long time. Master Yan pursed his lips and narrowed his eyes slightly. As soon as I squinted my eyes, I remembered Yan Sushui's round little face. Innocent, intelligent, and cunning, her eyes seemed to see through everything, and she can vaguely see what she looked like when she was born. At the same time, it is also slightly different from Jiao Xiao. Actually, he knew that the child had been found half a year ago. Living in the house these past few months, he had countless opportunities to visit, but he never had one. The old lady glanced at him and asked the servant to retreat. Okay, that child and the home mansion are not blessed, child. You want a lot of things, but you can't find anyone who can bring hope to the home mansion. Jiao Jiao has been promoted to that position, and she is still your flesh and blood. Furthermore, Yan Sushui has already developed a bad temper outside the house. Letting her come back will be a bad thing. The old lady could not hide the disgust in her eyes. I have written a letter of renunciation for you in the future. It is impossible to return to the Marquis mansion, the old lady said lightly. Yan Yan was startled. Mother, she is my flesh and blood after all. You don't still hope to suppress her arrogance and let her come back in disgrace, do you? Don't even think about it. Even if you are willing, I will never let you do this. Besides, when she was at the house, the person in the pool was the koi fish were killed one by one, and the chickens and dogs in the house were lying on the ground moaning every day. She was a disaster. She and Jiao Jiao are not. The two of them face each other day and night, and sooner or later someone will notice something strange. Mr. Yan took a deep breath. Father, have you taken care of things? Don't let any signs be discovered. The old lady hummed softly. The old man happened to be seriously ill when the twins were born. At that time, the illness was severe, and he was afraid that the child would be aggravated by the illness. The old man lingered on the bed all day long, not knowing anything about the troubles in the house. Now that I have found a little granddaughter for nothing, probably only the old Marquis is really happy. I'm afraid there will be trouble when father comes back. The old lady sneered. Let's make trouble. How can he divorce me? Jiao Xiao, you're welcome to coax me. Tomorrow night is the New Year's Eve palace banquet. If you summon the gods on New Year's Day, there won't be any trouble. Yan Yan sighed and gave instructions carefully. The old lady nodded. When Yan Yan returned to the dormitory, Mrs. Li was sitting by the bed, looking at a pair of baby clothes on the bed in a daze. Yan Yan was startled. This is the quilt that Jiao Jiao and Sushui used in those days, and the clothes they wore before they were born. Smell it, 5 years have passed, and it still smells like milk. You burned all Sushui's belongings, and I secretly kept one set. Yan Yan said nothing. I thought she would suffer a lot after leaving the home mansion. It turns out that she has lived such a good life. From just a few words, one can understand that she was raised by the Manfu. No less than Jiao Xiao. I don't know why. She is obviously doing well, but she doesn't feel good about herself. Probably, it's because the child lacks everything, which makes her lack a sense of need. Why doesn't she understand me? I'm also a mother, why can't she be considerate of me? Jiao Jiao is her sister born from the same mother. They should have the closest relationship in the world. How could it be like this? What about being hostile to the other party? Why can't she let her sister Yurang? They are connected by the same blood, and they are not some evil breed from outside. Mrs. Li cried. Yan Yan's eyelids twitched. Shut up. What kind of evil are you talking about? My bloodline is not evil even if I am a concubine. Mr. Yan frowned. You are still thinking about the woman you keep outside, right? As long as I'm here, she can't even think of coming in. Yan Yan, I've helped you bring in all the aunts and concubines you want, but she is definitely not allowed. You two are in love with each other. You are your childhood sweetheart. She has already been married once. Are you ashamed? Are you ashamed to come back as an illegitimate wife after the flowers have faded? Shut up. Look at how you look now. You don't look like a matron. You look like a shrew, Yan Yan looked angry. I look like a shrew? It's all because of you. Mrs. Li was so stimulated that she immediately yelled angrily. She chose to marry someone else back then. After her husband-in-law died, she came back to join you. I gave birth to a son and a daughter for you, but you still want to divorce. Ha, if the imperial master hadn't declared that I was pregnant with the goddess, I would have almost given birth to the evil thing outside, right? Mrs. Li's face was full of resentment. She had just found out that she was pregnant. As a result, the woman who had been raised outside came to the door, stroking her belly and claiming that she was pregnant with Yan Yan's child. It was originally a big deal, but it's a pity. The imperial master came to visit her, and she suddenly became the favorite of the Ho family. This child, indeed, came to her to save her. The old lady, who originally had no intention of intervening, forced the outer room to abort the child. You blame me for giving birth to that evil thing, right? It's a pity. Mrs. Li touched the hairpin on her temples. With me and Jiao Jiao here, she can't come in. It will always be just an outer room that cannot be promoted. Mrs. Li sneered. The child I gave birth to is a goddess. Even if the ant was born, she would still be an evil daughter, an illegitimate daughter who could not see the light of day. Yan Yan suddenly lost all his anger and closed his eyes slightly. It's unreasonable. After saying this, Yan Yan rushed out of the door. Mr. Li smashed all the things on the table to the ground. Her husband was not at ease, and Yan Sushui was not at ease either. None of them were good things. Having taken her back, she has already taken a lot of risks. Why can't she be considerate of herself and insist on competing with Jiao Xiao? Mrs. Li calmed down her temper, went to the small kitchen to prepare a table of delicious food, and delivered it to Yan Jiao Jiao herself. This is the good daughter she has longed for. Early on the next morning, Yan Yan changed into official uniform and went to court. New Year's Eve is the last morning court meeting of the year, and there is also a New Year's Eve palace banquet in the evening. Early in the morning, Mr. Yan went out early in the wind and snow. Sir Yan, I heard that you have severed ties with that child. Sir Yan, do you really not want your daughter anymore? All the lords asked in a low voice when they were in the Jinluan hall. Lord Yan smiled bitterly. That child's heart is as high as the sky, and the Marquis's temple is too small to accommodate a big Buddha like her. I will probably never see her again in this life. Sir Yan is exactly the 5th rank, and he can stand at the end of the Jinluan hall in the previous court. They sang loudly. The emperor has arrived. Everyone knelt down in unison, and Master Yan also followed the crowd into the main hall. Long live my emperor, long live the emperor. Ping Shen, the young emperor, has an outstanding figure, with jade trees facing the wind. He raises his hand and Lord Yan stands up. Slightly raised his eyes and looked into a pair of clear and bright eyes. Master Yan was stunned. On the dragon chair, which was too high to be reached and could not be looked directly at, sat the daughter he had kicked out yesterday. Han Sui Sui. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Shengsheng. Chapter 229. Chapter 229. The Benefactor of the Xia Mansion. Yan Iking, why are you trembling? Is it me, the tyrant, who makes Iking afraid? The emperor sat beside the dragon chair and glanced sideways at Yan Yan. Snap. Yan Yan knelt on the ground, sweating all over his head. I don't dare, I don't dare. Your Majesty has brought peace to the world since he came to the throne. He is a benevolent king destined by God. Looking at Yan Iking sweating profusely, why not, go and stand at the door to cool off. Fujuxiao glanced at him lightly. Yan Yan immediately thanked the Lord for his kindness, and then retreated to the gate of Jinluan Hall. Silver charcoal is lit everywhere in the corners of the hall, bringing a touch of warmth in this snowy season. Sir, stand at the air outlet of Jinluan Palace. Under the eaves, snowflakes fell on his shoulders and head, making him shiver from the cold. Sushui took out 2 roasted and cracked sugar chestnuts from his pocket and clicked them like a little hamster. Well, it's the coolest on the steps. The emperor didn't even raise his head. Master Yan, go to the steps to cool off for a while. Master Yan bowed shakily and stood directly on the steps. Oh, now even the eaves are gone. Master Yan felt that his whole body was almost numb, and the tips of his eyebrows were frozen into 2 icy edges. Sushui sat on the dragon chair with her short legs crossed, occupying half of the country, and the eyes of the admonishment officer below were twitching. Your Majesty, since ancient times there has been no reason for people to sit crowded together on the throne. The remonstrator risked his life to remonstrate. All the ministers agreed. After all, the emperor is such a big man, he can only be a sideline. The little girl occupied 9/10 of the room, half sitting cross-legged, and the other half holding chestnut shells. Fujuxiao nodded, deeply convinced. Go and bring a small stool. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, your Majesty still has reason to favor me. The chamberlain quickly brought a small stool. When the emperor saw this, he immediately stood up and sat on it. Now, there will be no more crowding around Sushui. Let's go to court. The emperor waved his hand and sat next to the dragon chair. The admonisher's face turned red with anger and his voice trembled. Turning his head to look at the Minister of Civil Affairs, Zhou Shangshu silently raised his head and looked at the sky. What are you thinking about? That's my junior uncle. Turning back to look at the Lu family, the Lu family shook their heads helplessly. Logically speaking, Mr. Lu's junior sister should go and pay their respects. All the ministers looked at Lord Xie. General Xie has fought side by side with His Majesty for many years. General Xie plays a decisive role in His Majesty's heart. Sure enough, General Xie stood up. Your Majesty, this is inappropriate. The dragon chair is a symbol of the Emperor's status. How can we allow Miss Yan to sit on it? It has never made sense. General Xie shook his head, frowned slightly, and looked at Sushui with a somewhat dissatisfied look. The Yan family is so incompetent that they can't even raise a girl. General Xie is considered Fujuxiao's confidant. At this moment, he said calmly, does it mean that I am no longer an emperor because I lack a dragon throne? Don't you believe me? Your Majesty, I don't dare. But the royal power cannot be provoked. How can this be so? Do you have to be the one who confuses the Lord at such a young age? General Xie has become much older these days, and he is an extremely old-fashioned and loyal veteran. General Xie, be careful. Confusing the master? Confusing what kind of master? You eat more by her, by the soft meat on her body. Fujuxiao glanced at him. General Xie knew that he was angry, so he closed his eyes unconvinced. Mouthed. General Xie took a hard look at Yan Sushui's book. Although the emperor withstood the pressure, General Xie gave her a hard gouge when he was about to leave the court. After the court, the emperor coaxed Sushui seriously. General Xie has a vicious mouth, but he has no bad intentions. If he talks too much next time, I will send him back to the border. He just happened to return to Beijing this time to find his daughter Fujuxiao's side. I feel guilty for him. Over the years, I have followed me in the south and north, and I have offended many people. Later, my enemies took revenge and lost my daughter. In the past few years, I followed me to fight in Baidi, and I was deeply trapped in Baidi. I didn't know whether I was alive or dead. Mrs. Xie, the general of the Xie family branch, when she was driven out of Xie's mansion, she almost lost her twins. I almost couldn't survive Mrs. Xie's delivery. Later, it is said that I met an expert and saved Mrs. Xie's 3 lives. Otherwise, General Xie would really be at the end of his rope. Fujuk Xiao sighed. General Xia's daughter has not been found yet. Speaking of which, General Xia is a man who doesn't take soft and hard advice, and doesn't take in oil or salt, but he is a strict wife. Probably because he knows that his wife and children are suffering with him, he really doesn't respond to Mrs. Xia's requests. He points to the east and dares not go west. Sushui's mouth was filled with sugar chestnuts, and she made two oohs and ahs. By the way, I have to leave the palace in the afternoon. Before I entered the capital, I once helped someone. She said she would have a banquet with her husband and thank me. Sushui swallowed the chestnut and looked at the emperor eagerly. The emperor nodded and sent his attendants to follow her as usual. There is a New Year's Eve palace banquet in the evening. The imperial kitchen has gone out to hold the banquet with all its energy, but we have to come back early. The emperor caressed her forehead, but why didn't she grow taller? Sushui's eyes immediately brightened and she nodded heavily. When I left the palace in the afternoon, it was extremely lively inside and outside the capital. As soon as he left the palace, a maid came up and asked, "Is this Miss Yan?" Our lady asked her servant to wait for the girl here early in the morning. "It's cold, please get into the carriage." The maid was extremely respectful. When Sushui got on the carriage, Ayu looked at the small characters on the carriage and pursed her lips slightly. Gently pinched the corners of his clothes. The mansion is not far from the palace, but it only takes a cup of tea to reach the door. Xia Mansion. Ayu, however, was breathing rapidly and holding Sushui's hand nervously. "You have ever rescued Mrs. Xia and her unborn child?" Ayu looked at Sushui seriously. Yes, Mrs. Xia was very skinny back then, but her belly was huge, and her eyes had no desire to live. So Sushui helped her and gave an amulet to the two children who were destined to me. Ayu's eyes were slightly red, she said nothing and gave a deep salute to Sushui. Her memory of this period has gradually recovered, but she has never dared to come to Xia's house to recognize her relatives. As a legitimate daughter of a high family, her innocence and reputation will be ruined if she lives abroad for a day. What's more, she has been missing for 4 years. He was also imprisoned by the gangsters for 3 years. Ayu lowered her head firmly and followed Sushui into the gate of Xia's house. Mrs. Xia stood in front of the gate with her 2 sons in her hands. Beside him stood a dark-faced general in official uniform. The general did not look like he was in the court at all. At this moment, his face was full of fawning, coaxing Mrs. Xia. "Don't worry, madam, my benefactor didn't just save you, she also saved my entire Xia family. If something happens to my wife and children, Xia won't be able to survive." General Xia almost swore to the sky. When the benefactor arrives, Mr. Xia will definitely die because of the benefactor. To repay the great kindness, General Xia is a strict wife-keeper. As soon as he turned around, he saw Yan Sushui, who had just read a book by him. "Quickly, kowtow to your benefactor." I saw his old wife and her pair of sons and came forward to kowtow. "General Xia? It's over. It must be me who kneels on the washboard tonight." End of this chapter. My koi sister is 3.5 years old. Author, Xia Sheng. Chapter 230. Chapter 230, Finding the Xia family's daughter. General Xia was stunned. Mrs. Xia turned her head and gave him a kick. General Xia silently kowtowed to his benefactor. Head. Mrs. Xia, are these the children? Sushui looked at her with a smile. Mrs. Xia burst into tears as soon as she saw her. "Hand out your hand." To hold Sushui's hand. "Yes, the child survived because of your blessing." It was not only because of the life-saving ginseng she bought Sushui, but also because she gave herself the faith to last until she gave birth to the child. She was in very bad condition at the time. The husband followed the prince, and while several princes were fighting for the rightful son in the capital, the Xia family branch chose the king of Jin. It happened that General Xia and the prince disappeared, and she was driven out of the capital. She was pregnant at the time and really had a death wish. Actually, I have to thank you once. After returning to the capital, the battle for the direct line has reached a fever pitch. The prince is about to return to the capital to take the throne, and people from all sides are surging. Someone has killed my child. Mrsya held onto her hand. Sushui's hands trembled slightly. You can see the fear at that time. When I found out, the two children were already covered in quilts, their faces were bruised and their bodies were cold. Mrsya still remembers the fear and despair at that moment. At that time, she even felt deeply resentful towards her husband. 3 children, all of them had a bad end. He followed the prince to seize the legitimate son, but harmed the whole family. The relationship between her and General Xia as husband and wife had come to an end at that moment. But don't want to. At that time, the sachet that Sushui gave to the 2 children caught fire without fire. The burning smoke fell on the child and disappeared immediately. In an instant, the 2 children were crying loudly, their faces rosy and breathing heavily. She knew at that moment that Sushui had saved the 3 of them again. General Xia looked at Yan Sushui with cold sweat dripping from his forehead. What are you looking at my benefactor for? Are you a fool? Why don't you invite your benefactor in quickly? Mrsya wiped her tears with a smile and glared at General Xia. Sushui stood at the door and hesitated. Sushui shouldn't go in. This is unreasonable. General Xia from the province took another copy of Sushui. Sushui is so scared. Today, Sushui was pointed at and scolded by General Xia. Sushui is too timid to go in. Sushui timidly pulled the corner of Mrsya's clothes. Complained softly. Mrsya's eyes widened. Did you read Sui Sui Yi Ben? Did you scold your little benefactor? Xie Jingzong, you are such a piece of shit. You actually offended my little benefactor? Didn't you take our mother's life seriously? You heartless thing, you were not there when I needed you. When I needed you to save my life, you were not here. It was hard to save, but you actually offended your little benefactor. Are you going to force us 3 to death? Mrsya cried and scolded immediately. General Xia was so scolded that he felt guilty and admitted his mistakes again and again. Damn it, if he knows that the benefactor is her, how can he dare to scold her? I'm afraid I have to give her a bag of snacks to make her happy. How freely he cursed half an hour ago. Now I feel so embarrassed when my daughter-in-law twists my ears. Finally, the twins peed their pants and saved his life, and he hurriedly ran away with the children in his arms. Ayu lowered her head, and the Xia family remained the same as before, unchanged. Mrsya took Sushui into the courtyard. Sushui pointed to a courtyard in the distance and said, "Where is where?" Mrsya was startled, her eyes secretly red. This is where my daughter who lost 4 years ago lives? I have always kept a boudoir for her, and she will definitely be found. Mrsya's eyes were red. A woman has been missing for 4 years. Madam, aren't you afraid that her reputation will be damaged? Sushui glanced at Mrsya, who had never raised her head. Mrsya suddenly became a little excited. Regardless of her reputation or innocence, she is my daughter after all. She is my lifeblood. Little benefactor, no matter what the outside world says or speculates, I still hope that she lives. If possible, I would rather use my own. Give me your life in exchange for her life. Mrsya cried softly. As long as she can come back, I can accept anything. Mrsya sobbed. Suddenly, I heard a voice asking, then she was kidnapped for 4 years and lost her reputation and innocence. Do you want her to? The Xia family is a noble family. Aren't you afraid that everyone will accuse the Xia family of losing its reputation? What if she drags down the Xia family and makes it difficult for them to hold their heads high? Mrsya squeezed Juanzi and wiped her tears gently, and said seriously, as long as I can get my son back, what does it mean to lose my reputation? Only when she comes back can my heart come back to life. I will wait for her for the rest of my life. Go home. As soon as she raised her head, Mrs. was stunned. I saw the girl in front of me with red eyes, watching her cry silently. Mother, my daughter is back with a plop. Ayu knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Mrs. The two of them burst into tears, holding each other's arms and crying. Mrs. was crying and feeling sorry for the child. She hugged Ayu tightly and refused to let go, as if she would lose the child if she let go. General Xie heard the cries and rushed over. When he saw Ayu's face, he was also shocked and burst into tears. After 4 years of not seeing each other, he was so close to his daughter that he didn't even recognize her. In the past 4 years, he suffered from guilt and heartache. He held his daughter's portrait in his heart almost every day in the border area. Now that the child has been lost and found, the missing piece of the Xie family has also been completed. My son, I thought I would never see you again in this life. You silly girl, since you went to Beijing with your benefactor, why don't you go home? Why don't you go home? I miss you so much that I'm going to die. Mrs. hit her gently, but she couldn't bear to hurt her. My daughter has returned to the mansion once, Ayu cried in a low voice. When I came back, I happened to meet the family of my second uncle and my third uncle. It was probably because my mother wanted to find her legitimate daughter, but my second and third uncles said that the girl had lost her reputation while living abroad, and finding her back would only bring shame to the women of the Xie family. Even if it is found, it will only be accompanied by the ancient Buddha of the Green Lantern for the rest of its life. At that time, she returned to Suaman Pavilion in a panic and with a pale face. Silly girl, mother has already separated them. They are in the wrong team and will be liquidated by the new emperor sooner or later. They asked the Xie family for help but failed, so they deliberately vented their anger on your parents. Why do you care about them? If you can come back, who dares to say anything? Tear their mouths apart. Mrs. was filled with hatred at this moment. She would never tolerate anyone who caused her to lose her daughter again. By the time the Xie family calmed down, General Xie had already slapped himself twice on the ear. Yan Sushui, how can this be confusing the Lord? This is a great benefactor who saved his Xie family. If it weren't for her, Xie's family would be in pieces, and he would already be alone. My benefactor, you have saved the Xie family. From now on, Xie Jingzong is only willing to serve you. With your head above water. General Xie looked serious. Half a day ago, his backbone was still at odds with Sui Sui. With the Yan family's daughter, the civil and military officials in the court expected him to stand up and suppress the power of the Yan family girl. Turning his head, he becomes the opponent's licking dog. Customized a pair of excellent tiger skin jackets. Tomorrow I will roll on the throne for my benefactor. End of this chapter.